the meeting to order at 7:03. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Hillis, could you take attendance, please?
Mrs. Castle?
Here.
Mr. Hirakawa?
Here.
Mr. Lanacey?
Hello.
Mrs. Mack? Here. Mr. Strang?
Here. Okay, 1.2, review of agenda. Any additions to the agenda? Do you want to talk about the agenda tonight?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our January Board of Education meeting. Nice, fruitful audience. February, I'm sorry. Scratch up the record. We'll start again. Welcome to the February Board of Education meeting. It's been a great 2019 so far. So just to kind of go through our agenda, Assemblyman John McDonald is supposed to join us. I have not heard from him, so he might have been pulled from something, or that could be him. Or the next door that opens. So again, John McDowell will be joining us. Also, we'll be hearing tonight from Mrs. Carbone. We'll be going over our district data. And of course, we'll be going over the budget, which is kind of the biggest piece of our news at this time of year. And besides that, some consent agenda items that'll be of interest.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, moving right along, 1.3. Approval of minutes of the previous meeting. We've only had one in the last month from January 17, 2019. Somebody can make a motion?
So moved.
Second. Questions or discussion?
I had a couple minor edits that I gave Sharon.
Okay. Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Okay. 1.4, acceptance of the financial reports. We have two this month. The internal claims auditor's report for 2019 and the monthly treasurer's report with budget transfers. Somebody make a motion?
Second.
Questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? 1.5, visitors and communication. Communications to the board, I don't believe we received anything. And B, opportunity for the public to be heard. Anybody sign up?
Nobody.
No? Okay, we'll have an opportunity later. If you so wish. 2.0, reports to the Board of Education. 2.1, Board Ed reports and updates. We have a couple. Why don't we start with Mrs. Carbone?
Okay, good evening. January has been an incredibly busy month at school. We have a lot of testing that was going on. Our classroom teachers were doing the reading assessments. We were doing the NWEA, which was the second of our 3 times a year universal screening for all of our students in reading and math. And our special education teachers and therapists are all busy doing all of their testing in preparation for annual reviews in April. So January was a whirlwind. You have this in paper form in front of you too, in case it might be a little bit easier to view. So what I did was I looked at, this is our math results for NWEA for the winter time, so it's January. I think it took us maybe 7 days to test the entire school, 400 kids, ELA. You'll see there's 3 bars for each grade, fall, winter, and this is the national norm on this side. So for math, you can see we're kind of variable across the grades, but for each grade, the good news is there's been some nice growth from when the children entered in the fall to where we are in the winter. And this is for ELA. Similar trend, our kids are actually scoring a little bit higher than the norm in many grades on ELA. We have our fall, our winter, and our norm. But right across the board, our students are responding very well to the curriculum, and the growth is beautiful. So we spent all that time doing that. What are we doing with it? That's the most important part. So today and yesterday, we looked at all these these scores and we shared with the faculty areas of strength and weakness and how areas can be incorporated throughout the curriculum in science and social studies. How can we keep increasing our literacy skills? Each grade level has their PLCs where they meet with Dr. Yotis weekly, and the information from the assessments will be used to inform best practices. Right after all the assessments were done, we had our data team meetings where we met with all the staff. We talked about every single kid, how they did, and our remedial staff, their schedule was adjusted to accommodate any new kids that needed to be picked up or kids that were doing well in flying that can be given some more independence. And our special education teachers as well, we're using that data to look at our next year's projections for the support needed for our students for the 19-20 school year. So out of the back to one of the middle school PLC meetings, one of the teachers had asked, so what can I do? I'm not an English teacher, I'm not a math teacher. What can I do to help, support our school and raise the literacy grades and math grades across the curriculum? So we were thinking about that and looking at the data. I feel like we always support our students who have IEPs and the special education needs. And then under the 20th percentile on the testing, we provide remedial support. But we still had a good number of students who fell kind of the low average range. They needed maybe just a little bit of reteaching in class, but they were doing well. They didn't need remedial support, but what can we do to boost those students, their skills? And those are our kids that maybe on the state test might score a 2. How can we get them to a 3? So I went grade by grade and printed out the data. There's scores that link. There's numerous reports. And looking, I found that pocket of kids that typically score within that low average range. And I looked at what skills they needed. What things were they missing on this assessment that we can now use in the classroom across the board to build up. So I did that for K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. And I met with the faculty, the 2 different meetings today and yesterday, and we went through and talked about simple things that vocabulary, academic vocabulary, what they can reinforce in their class to help our kids see how literacy is across the curriculum. Things like cause and effect and inferences and how they can tie that into social studies and science. So this was something that the staff had asked for, they were inquiring about, so we put it together for them. And I think it was pretty well received, and we're going to continue that work through the PLCs. So, thank you.
Great.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Just one question. I noticed on the first, second, third on both ELA and math, they're below the norm. Is there any indicators on why? Was there a change in testing or anything like that?
So second into third, or first into second?
First, second, and third for math and reading.
First into second, that there's always a dip because in K and 1, the test, the way it's designed is read to them. In second grade, they read.
Okay.
So even in the norms also dip, so we did dip too. Second into third, I'd have to look specifically at that cohort of kids and see what was going on, but off the top of my head, I'm not
Okay.
sure. But I can look into that. Thank you.
So I know we don't test pre-K, but do we do anything to help get them prepared for when they become kindergartners next year?
That's a good question. Formally, I don't believe there's anything. I know Mrs. Kane covers a lunch, and she's always she's in there for half an hour, and she brings letter cards and number cards and games, and she works with different groups.
They
when she's
have a
in
pretty
there.
rigorous curriculum that they're using, that they are assessing
As they
quite a bit through, and they have report cards that are pretty in-depth that I've looked at, because they said, should we change our report card, use what we're using, change it to something in GD, and it's pretty rigorous, it's pretty detailed, and they follow a pretty stringent curriculum. So there's lots of assessments that will come out of them, but we will screen those students coming into our kindergartners on March 13th. And we'll do the more formal screening through our kindergarten screening, and we'll be pulling all of them. So we'll have some data next week, some norm data like this. But right now, they have a lot of informal assessments that they do on a regular basis.
Do they use the one similar to what we saw when we did our visitation?
Yes.
That was a lot.
Yeah, it is.
A lot
Yeah,
for pre-K.
she brought me the report card. I was like, whoa.
I know. It was like sheets and
Yeah.
sheets of
Yeah,
evals that
everything.
they did.
And they have to do that every so many weeks through the Head Start mandates. But the assessment is ongoing, constant, and it's non-negotiable. They have to do all those checkpoints every other week, every 3 weeks, and they have a pretty extensive report card. So yeah, we have a lot of data, but we will be scoring them through some of our more formal assessments on the screening, and we'll have that.
That is very good to hear. I know some residents felt that pre-K was just glorified babysitting.
No.
It sounds like it's much more than that.
No, they do a lot of writing.
We'll have to show that resident the testing that they do.
Yeah.
Or any resident.
They do a lot of reading and writing throughout the day.
They are very
they are
impressive.
busy. Yeah.
You see them in the hall, they are very impressive too.
But if you went down in the morning 5 minutes after they left the cafeteria, they're already undressed, packed up, and doing an activity, writing your name, doing letters, blocks. I'm like, what are you doing already? You get quicker. You can unpack and to work quicker than the 5th grade. Yeah, no, they are busy. They are busy. Oh, sorry.
I just want to say
I go 4th grade.
That's a good one to pick on.
I just want to say thank you too to staff for the interest in those middle kids, because they often get lost because you know you have to provide services at this end, this upper end may not need anything, but there's always that group in the middle, and I think this is great, and hopefully it'll be well utilized.
And what's nice too about the assessment, you can also filter for skills to challenge those high level kids that may need that enrichment. And teachers have access to all that. They have passwords that they're able to get into NWEA, and you can filter it for skills that you want to introduce. So it can hit all ends of the continuum.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Okay, our next person is not here yet. So do you want to, I guess when he comes, if he comes, we can
Sure, we'll
pull him
just-
up on the spot and we'll just move on?
That works for me. Excellent.
Okay. So if we're moving on, we're going to move right into the district/superintendent program report.
Sure. Just a few things before we get into the budget piece at the superintendent's level, and I'll save the rest for Dr. Yotis when she does the building level. One of the pieces I'd like to point out to the board, I think they've seen through social media and through my reports, is right before break, we had our unexpected career day for the middle school. And again, I will say that was one event that really was truly just something remarkable. I mean, it really was something, you might have seen traditional career days in other locations where, people invite their families in, and that's a great thing, But I will say what's interesting, if you looked at our lineup, and I can certainly share that with you in Google Docs, to have everything from, a mortician to an electrician to, an aeronautical engineer, you're talking a pretty unique cross-section of 12 to 13 people. And all this was student interest based as well. So we use student interest and inventory to select students to which class they go to. But the eclectic group of people we had come out was just very impressive. And especially to do that right before break was awesome. So if you haven't seen any of those photos, check out our social media. It just really captures everybody that represented really careers that are accessible in our community, ranging from PhD level to 2-year degrees, and really where there's a career need. And I think that really helps inform our high school process as well. So just want to point that out as well.
While you're talking about that, my sister was one of the presenters
Oh, yes.
today, and she told me that she talks to in front of adults all the time. Talking to middle school, she was so nervous. She really, gives it up to teachers because having to do it every day. You all do a great job.
Very cool and collected. You never know she was nervous. But it was great, though. And if I may say, too, the kids were fantastic because it was both student interest-based, but also we tried to place them in locations they might not have thought. So, again, I don't think most students think about becoming a funeral home director, per se. But, again, it was very interesting, actually probably the most, ironically, a very engaging presentation. But, again, you wouldn't think to select that as one of those places. So we kind of tried to mix up what students were interested in versus what they might be interested in or might want to explore more of, which is really cool.
The funeral directors weren't hands-on, right?
They had some quiz games. I was like, oh, let's check them out first. At least, yeah, they had stress relief, which is good, Other than that, there were just a couple little things. As you can imagine, the past couple of weeks have been marked by weather. We had a lot of weather-related delays, but again, that's been part of our safety pieces. We always err on the side of safety, which has been great, and we thank the community for their support of our 2-hour delays. We've only used one snow day so far, but I think we've had about 13,000 2-hour delays, but we've been, again, safe and putting students first with that. As you know, speaking of safety, we did have a lockout. We were in a lockout this week as a result of the bank robbery that took place on Route 4 and Jordan Road. Again, that was just to point out that was precautionary. The police did not advise us to do that, but we did that just on our own end, just to make sure that we were erring on the side of caution. Again, whenever something like that happens, regardless if it's up the road or not in your school district, that is something that we did just out of precaution. So again, that was something that our staff, combination of them, we went into that procedure. We practiced these drills, but we just went into it not as a drill, but as a practice. And again, it took about 3 minutes to be in our place. And so again, commendations to the staff and also our students that just carried on with the rest of their day. Going along with that, oh please.
As you talk about that, I asked both of my kids, how was your day and whatever. I asked my older daughter, did you know that we were in a lockdown for part of the day? She said that she didn't realize it until much later in the day. My first grader had no idea. I didn't even let her know that she was. So that's another accommodation to the staff, just keeping things moving, not getting kids all in a panic and worried when they didn't need to be.
I see Belltop did too.
Belltop did as well, and as much as again, and they were that school is much closer to the location of where the robbery did occur. But obviously, again, though the police did not advise, and they perhaps had more information than we knew. Perhaps at that point, the suspects were in custody. But we still, both of us, did that in conjunction. And also, we did reach out to the police to kind of do a post-mortem, so to speak, or basically kind of look at what could we have done differently, what could maybe they do better next time in terms of notification, things like that. So myself and Superintendent Simons of East Greenwich will be meeting with the chief actually next week to kind of just discuss. Not that we want this to happen again, but should something like this happen again, what's maybe another way we can communicate as well. Going along with that, we will be practicing, but speaking of safety, March 8th we'll be doing an evacuation drill. We practice relocating our campus to the St. Jude's campus. So basically that being in a situation where perhaps we had to get out of this campus, perhaps a gas leak or the building was unsafe at that moment, and we needed to go to St. Jude's to kind of regroup and decide our next steps. We'll be practicing that March 8th. Notification will be going out to families that we will be doing that. It will be a quick morning piece. Our goal is to kind of time our speed, how long it takes to evacuate to St. Jude's, regroup, take our attendance, and then, of course, have our students return and pick up their day. We have an agreement with St. Jude's, as you know, to kind of use their site as an off-site evacuation point, and vice versa. They're welcome to use ours, and they'll be practicing using ours at some point as well. So again, just in that vein of safety, again, we practice these drills, but it is nice when these drills kind of show there is a purpose and we are prepared for them. So,
is this a full building evacuation? So will the business office?
Yes.
Everybody
will have to go, which is again a good practice of truly, in the case of, how do we really get out of here if we had to quickly and, efficiently and without making, without anyone staying behind, and then, regrouping. So it'll be exciting. So it's the first time I believe we did this about 4 or 5 years ago. So again, it'll be exciting to kind of do again, and, kind of see where we're at. But I'm very hopeful, and I think we'll be in great shape. So with that, I think we're ready for budget.
Sure.
That sounds good. Speaking of finances and safety. And if anyone would like copies of this will be on the website, and the staff, this will be emailed to you as well, and board members who get the paper copy, let me know too. One of the things I'd like to point out, though, with this budget presentation, we purposely use the same template each year for the purposes of consistency for the community, meaning our goal as a business office is to make sure that the budget is transparent and also easy to understand. I mean, we could print out, our budget is about 100 pages if we print out each code, but it's hard to decipher for the general public. So the goal is that if you were to look at our presentations from year to year to year, you could compare the February presentation of last year to 2016 to 15, so that you really can kind of see where we're at, and also in layperson terms, because I think budgets can be very deceptive if they're not explained thoroughly. So again, you'll notice it's kind of a similar format to what you've seen, but of course with the new information that's there. So where are we? So of course, as you know, we always start with our continuous problem, and I think this is every school's problem, or I should say challenge, is basically how do you provide a rich academic program, support the district goals, and of course areas of focus, but also the key word being that sustainable financial outlook for the short and long term. So again, the key being sustainability. One of the things that I think breaks anyone's heart is when you look at school budgets and see that a school perhaps added staff one year, and the next year they were cutting staff. Or they added a program, or they added 3 or 4 enrichment opportunities, and then 2 years later those same things were being cut in an effort to balance the budget. Because again, it was great for those 2 years, but wasn't sustainable. So Belle and I work very closely to kind of look at everything we do, from supplies to staffing, of what are we doing now, but also can we sustain it, or do we think we can sustain it based on our best economic predictions. So again, that kind of goal of what are we doing, but what can we ensure we can keep doing? Of course, our mission statement kind of captures that whole piece, which again is something we've seen displayed in our building, but of course we use that as well when we think of programs. When people say, why are we adding what we do, or why do we fund what we do, we try to hope, and I shouldn't say we hope, it's our goal to always connect it back to our mission statement and of course our areas of focus and our district goals. So as you know, our district goals do not change, but our areas of focus, that's something that the board and I do in concert in July or August. This year we did it in August, where we kind of look at what are some areas of focus that are kind of outside the goals. And as you can see, they kind of are reflected the same as in some ways the goals, but also they kind of are a little bit more tangible. So again, engage students and staff in effective, meaningful collaboration. So you have the PLCs that Dr. Yotis does. Again, we work very hard to build in common planning time. As you can imagine, building in common planning time has a cost to it because it's not the most efficient schedule at times. But the point is to make that collaboration time when teachers are free to actually be meaningful and actually positive. So actually use that common planning time that effectively. And to examine school demographics, and that's an area of focus that we had last year, but to continue to recognize that we have a changing demographic at GD than we did perhaps 10 years ago. Continue to examine special education models. Again, notice that's pluralized. It's not just one model, but the model that fits the student, not one size fits all. And of course, that last one is probably the most fluid or most unique to us right now, is to monitor and assess the success of the first year of pre-kindergarten. Because this is our first year of adding our pre-kindergarten program. So again, do all these things kind of tie into what we're spending our resources on? So, as of today, what do we know? So at present moment, we can expect a total state aid increase of $60,482. And that is a very specific number for the reason of, and I'm certainly happy to give copy, this is something that John McDonald, if you just, spent time last night, these are state aid runs that come out. You'll notice it's a very similar format. I'm happy to kind of pass around. The reason I don't photocopy this is on purpose is because once again, in the wrong hands or in the hands without an explanation, it can be very misleading. So for example, that number is a hard number. We know we will definitely receive $60,000, $482 over what we did last year. If you were to look at the state aid runs, it would appear that we're receiving $363,000 because that, again, includes building aid. Now, it's delineated out if you were to break it down, but as you can see to the general public, that's why sometimes when the Times Union run articles, they've said, wine and skills, so for example, next year, our aid looks like it's an increase of 12%. That is mathematically true, but that includes building aid. Remember, building aid is based on the fact that we just finished a capital project, which means we have to start paying back that loan and the interest on that. So again, that's not money you can spend. It has to go towards paying down that principal and that debt. So again, it looks like a lot more money, but that money's already been encumbered to pay off the building project. But what you can spend on program is actually $60,482. That's foundation aid. That's straight up foundation aid. There's other aid in there as well, but as we discussed in other meetings, it's expense driven, meaning if you spent $7,000 on textbooks, you might receive $4,000 back in aid. So again, it's based on what you spend, but it's not necessarily new money. It's not money you could use to spend. You're using that money to supplant that same item. So again, the more you spend, the more aid you get, but you also don't want to base your budget on that as well because it implies you're spending it, you're spending that money. So again, when you look at what you can expect, definitely, again, pending there wasn't an economic crash, that's what we kind of build our budget, we start with, rather than just looking at that bottom line number, which again is 12%. Now, second piece, so you have two sources of revenue. You have your state aid, and of course then you have your tax revenue. With the 2% tax levy law, and again, of course we discussed before that 2% law is vague because it's not a hard 2% number, but when that formula, and that is a very hard formula that Bell, again, plugs, basically we're given factors, our growth factor as a town, our tax rate, our tax levy. It's basically a formula that tells you the max levy percent you can increase. It's not something you can negotiate. It just gives you the max levy. So based on the district's lack of, and I say significant tax growth, meaning construction. So not that we haven't grown, but as you know, we are a finite district of 3.2 square miles. We don't have major developments. We don't have major shopping centers. The North Greenbush Common School District does. We do not. So our growth factor, which is part of the formula, is pretty much a 1. It's like 1.0052, let's say. Now some schools might have 1.6 if they had 3 new shopping malls go up, and that's a good thing. That would raise your ability to levy, and that just means that we're steady. I mean, it's good that we have at least a steady growth, but it's not anything massive that you'd see. So the max levy that we could raise, the max maximum that we could go out to the voters for would be a 2.52 levy increase, 2.52% levy increase. To put in perspective, last year it was 2.34. So you can see we're within decimal points of that same, we say 2%, but it's really in that 2.52, 2.3, 2.5%. That's the max we could go out, which would increase the overall tax levy by $134,000. Some would say, well, you don't really have to go out at 2.52, right? Couldn't you go out at like 2.3 or 2.2? You could. The benefit would be that you couldn't raise $134,000. You'd be levying less. And actually, I believe we figured out at one point for each decimal less, like if you went at 2.42, but we figured it was about $10,000. I think, so I mean, it kind of would weigh of if you went to the voter for 2.4 and you lost, now you had $124,000. Is that really more appealing to the voter, and it's really helping the district, or do you go for your max levy? So again, that's the max that we could achieve, and the max that we could receive in an increase. Remember, this is increase budget to budget, if that makes sense. Questions so far? Again, if I get too excited or quick, please let me know. These numbers get very energizing. And again, obviously, tax rates, of course, as you know, that comes out. That's in August when we adopt the tax rate. So again, it's a 2.52% levy, but the town of North Greenbush actual rate might be very different. Remember, we also pull from the town of Brunswick and also, Wine and Skill proper, right? And Avon Park as well. Postal. So again, the actual rate of what it would affect the property owner varies, but that's based on the assessor in the county. We can't control that. We can only put out the levy. So again, could someone's taxes perhaps in Post-Kill be 6%? Yes. Could the town of North Greenbush be less than 2.52 and be 1 point something? Absolutely. But all we can control is the actual levy, not the rate. So total guaranteed max revenue increase, guaranteed, there's not one thing that could really affect this, is $194,482. And that's actually very solid, because actually last year around this time, we were kind of in the range of about 120. So to put in perspective, last year that number was in the 120s of guaranteed if you took the tax levy and the total foundation aid. So again, we're in much better shape. As you know, the governor did, at this point, indicate that he was going to prioritize education. So the state aid at this point was much higher than it was last year at the same point. So $194,482 is the max you could levy right now if we were to go after the voter and create a budget right now. So again, that's a good thing. But as you can imagine, as every school district is in this situation right now, is that 194 is fantastic. But when you take into some things, as the phrase we use often, the open your doors expenses, things you can't control, you can't negotiate that, you can't change that. These are some numbers that we can kind of look at that are hard numbers. So right now, contractually mandated raises, meaning these are not negotiable for the teachers and the teacher aides, meaning they have an agreement that is, specifies their salary, their step. That mandatory increase is $150,000, and that includes FICA, ERS, TRS, like that's a contribution we make. So again, those are things that we cannot negotiate. Now, that does not include non-unionized 10 to 12-month employees, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria, clerical. Those individuals are not under a contract. They're on year-to-year contracts, so they're not guaranteed a raise. Now, obviously, it's good practice to give those individuals, especially those first three people, or the bus drivers, clerical, custodians, but they're not unionized, so they don't have an agreement. So right now, that's not built into the budget, but obviously that's the proper thing to do. Somebody McDonald, great to see you. I can certainly pause you. Sure. Oh, well, thank you. Health and prescription insurance coverage. So again, we did get that. And these are hard numbers that we have. So Val and I will start with estimates, but these are the hard numbers that we can put in. So again, just health and prescription insurance alone. Dental actually did not increase at all, so that was a good thing. But basically, it was an overall 12%. Most of that is in prescription drug costs, but that was the average when you took the health and prescription. It averaged to 12%. Mostly, again, the prescription being higher. So that cost to the district of all those that are insured moving from one year to the next is $177,000. So as you can see, again, it's not to be dismal, but if you add those two numbers together, the guaranteed contractual raises plus health and prescription insurance, which again we have to do, you already kind of can see that deficit of that 194. You can see that 194 is guaranteed, but this doesn't include anything else. We're just talking two specific line items right now. Other pieces, though, obviously, that go into any sort of our budget, special education placements. These are out placements, not special education programming, but each placement costs approximately $60,000. To just put that in perspective, this January, we had a student that moved into the district, into the Wine and Skill Free School District. This child was placed in the Wildwood School, coming from another district. So obviously we honored that placement. It's the right placement for that child. That placement obviously is a mid-year placement, but that placement was $30,000. So again, that was something we couldn't expect, but by budgeting well, we anticipate that and build that into our budget. So it's not something that you necessarily see, but we have to be prepared for when that happens, and this January is a perfect example of that happening. And again, we would be foolish not to prepare for that. So we always build in a placeholder, but as you can see now, for next year, it'd be wise for us to build another placeholder in because we've used that placeholder now on that student that just moved in. So again, we always want to be prepared to rather be plush in that area than be caught trying to pull from different line items to make up that placement. Charter school and GD tuition, that changes daily. And I say, well, daily is probably a little bit extreme, but it just makes it a point. Charter school, right now we don't have any students there. Currently, there are no students attending a charter school. As you know, in the past, we've had 2 students, and again, that was the case of, one day they registered for school, and they, elected to attend, I think it was Green Tech, Troy Prep, and again, that was just, that's our obligation as a school district to do that, and that was about $12,000 each student. GD high school tuition, as you know, we tuition out our high school students. We budget for our high school students. Our tuition prices range from $3,000 to $11,000 with our agreements, depending on where a child goes, whether they go to Troy or Able Park or Rittenkill. So again, if we have a child that moves in or a family that moves in that has a high school student that we've never met, that's fine, but we are obligated to pay that tuition. So we have to be prepared that we could have a family move in that has 3 high school students. Are we ready to send those kids to their high school of choice? We couldn't say, well, you have to pick the cheapest tuition. We offer them those 5, And total, just for a little figure, $1.6 million of our general budget is tuition. So it's based on tuition. I have a $9 million budget, over $9 million. And of course, determination of 8th grade high school choice. Right now, we budget very conservatively for the higher end, but obviously the final choices are due by mid-March. But of course, we'll see at the end what is the current 8th grade class that's going to 9th grade. Will they choose Troy? Troy, like I said, runs around $3,000 a student. Rittenkill, I think, is around $11,000.
Actually went down this year. It's
went down?
9,800.
Oh, 98. Okay, so we just saved some money. It's good. But as you can see, we budget for the idea that if every single one of our students elected to attend Rittenkill, while that might be unlikely, we have to be ready to finance that. Now we'll have hard numbers for that obviously soon, but we want to start right now with at least an estimation. And again, the above are open your doors expenses. They're not negotiable, so they can't be changed. And again, you'd be very risky to kind of cheapen any one of those line items. This one, of course, we just always put on. This is not a cost to the taxpayer. It's not a cost of the general fund. But obviously, as you know, part of our fleet maintenance is replacing 2 vehicles each year. Our goal this year is to purchase one 28-passenger bus and one 66-passenger bus, and obviously to phase 2 of them out. So again, to take our 2 oldest, the ones that are becoming most costly in repairs, the ones that are becoming more likely to not pass inspection, sell those, or I should say trade those in for, they are worth something in trade, and then replace those with new vehicles. It is much more, again, cost effective to buy a newer vehicle than it is to maintain an older vehicle. In fact, actually, we have an agreement right now to purchase a 2018 model year vehicle that's not been on the road at obviously a very discounted price. It's not been touched, but obviously it will not be the 2019 year. We have a tentative agreement that we could enter, which would be great. It would actually save us some money on that. But again, that's not an additional cost to the taxpayer. That's if we have money left over at the end of the fiscal year. If we just put that on there as one thing to consider. But actually, the reason we can do that is because we budget well. Meaning, we never, one of the pieces that I know in the past, when you finance vehicles or if you're leasing vehicles, then you get caught in a payment plan. We basically buy our buses, I hate to say in cash, but we're not bonding them. We're buying them with our excess fund balance, or our excess funding at the end of the year. That's a good thing for us. But again, that's only possible because we budget, I think, very conservatively well. If we excised each one of our line items, we wouldn't have the ability to purchase new vehicles, and we'd be in a different situation. If our line items, if we truly spent every bit of our budget each year down to the penny, it would mean that we were either loaning for buses or we weren't buying, and then we'd be in a situation where we were repairing buses, and that would be much more expensive. So just to point out, that's the reason we can do that is because of the things above, by budgeting conservatively. So some things to address, and of course things we want to address in the budget, just to point out, and again, obviously you can see right now there is a gap that is there, and obviously that doesn't include also things like BOE's expenses, gas and electricity. Now, Belle and I have worked, again, say we meet 3 times a day would probably be an understatement. We spend a lot of time together, always, but especially now, so it's a lot of fun. But one of the pieces that we do is we budget very conservatively with the idea of putting a solid number in with the goal that the actual cost is lower. So for example, gas and electricity, we put in perhaps a 5% increase with the idea that it comes back perhaps at a 3%, but at least we're prepared for that. So that's why some of that gap is not exactly a hard piece, but we don't have a solid number yet. It also could be a 6% increase, and we have to be ready for that too, just a little example. But first of all, pre-K is here and remains funded entirely by the general fund. The board is aware, and I think I made it public during one of our meetings. We did apply for New York State grant funding for pre-K, but we were rejected because our need was not greater enough. So we did apply when Cuomo did release that mid-year around October, November pre-K funding. We did go for it. And again, it was while we were a tier 3 school, we were highly unlikely to get. We felt it was our obligation as a school district to put out for it, at least show that we did try. We just didn't receive it. We just didn't have the high enough need. So again, having our pre-K classroom is entirely funded by the general operating budget right now. Maintaining current resources to support larger, and I put that in quotes because actually when I started 4 years ago, we had the large class, which again at that point was the second grade group, comparatively to the others. In fact, our larger class now, which is the current 4th grade, is not all that off from our 3rd grade, and actually not that off. I mean, we're talking, 26, 27, 28. But our second grade's running at 24, 25. So the days of the classes of 16, 17 are which is a good problem to have for us. Our enrollment is up. Our enrollment is well over 400, and that's a good place to be. But the idea of the small class, the class of 16, is not there. So I put it in quotes because larger is also relative depending on where you look. And also to point out Mrs. Carbone's presentation, you notice some of the highest performing cohorts are actually the larger class sizes. So again, I feel good about the resources we support for those classes, but that's also remedial staff, the teaching assistant that we provide for the general ed students. So again, but to keep that support obviously has a cost to it. PD opportunities for staff, obviously the PLC piece we do in-house, but also outside conferences, special education program delivery, that's not just outplacement, but also what we do in-house, aid support, special ed teacher support, OT, PT, speech. Again, the projection meetings will begin soon with special education teachers, Dr. Yotis, where they'll start looking at service needs for each student and what we need to do for that program, for that student. Technology infrastructure, as you know, that's one thing we never want to decrease. It's kind of like the buses. If you decrease infrastructure maintenance, it might save you a few dollars one year, but then of course the next year when something fails, like a server, or you're not replacing your equipment like the computers around you, you're now something in a deficit and needing to purchase when they do actually break. As you know, they become obsolete very quickly. And of course that last one being very key, that minimal disruption to the fund balance. So again, the biggest mistake, and I'm sure you've seen this in schools, and it's kind of like what we talked about before, it'd be very tempting to, especially when we talk about that larger class size, it's very tempting, and you might see on social media the idea, why can't they just add another teacher, right? It's just a teacher. It'd be easy to add. The key becomes, can you maintain that? And of course, the other piece is that minimal disruption of fund balance. So that's one piece. Besides, can we maintain it? It becomes very tempting, I think, similar to your home savings account of dipping into that fund balance. So using fund balance to fund general operating expenses is a great short-term piece to do. Okay, it's just for 1 year. It's never for 1 year. Once you base your budget on your fund balance, it's a slippery slope. And that's when you see schools that really become that kind of, you've seen that rating in the paper, susceptible to fiscal stress. It's because they dipped in that fund balance to use it for their general operating expenses. They're basically spending their savings to basically function. And like any savings, it's finite. So we want to have minimal disruption, and actually I would say zero disruption. And of course, debt services. We're starting a new project, debt payment on the new building, but as you know, we're still paying off our old project from 2001 and 2007. So again, we're still paying those pieces off, which is normal. You pay a 20 or 30-year loan, but we are still paying the principal and of course the interest that goes with that. And of course, one piece is, as you know, we've had a part-time librarian, and we've been working to kind of increase that role because our current library media specialist is part-time. The work that she does to collaborate with staff, not just in her teaching, is fantastic, but we kind of made a commitment as a district that's going to kind of increase that role. Again, that person is here part-time, but here well past their day, but to actually increase that so we can continue to offer pieces, both at the middle level and the elementary level. Right now, that person's 0.8. Would it be nice to see that person increase by a decimal point? That'd be fantastic. But again, that's obviously has a budget cost with that. And of course, increase FTEs. I put them in general to accommodate larger musical acts in the middle school. That's just one piece. Right now, we do have one program in the middle school running with 65 students, and that's a lot of students. Again, that is a lot of students without cheapening the middle school experience and making it just simply a study hall or a holding tank. So again, the opportunity of can we offer some other electives, and I say musical electives, maybe it's not musical electives, to kind of make sure that we have our students have a well-balanced 9-period day. These are just things that we like to look at in terms of priorities we'd like to address with our budget. So bottom line is, how do we balance revenues with mandatory and desired program expenses? So again, a lot of those things that I mentioned are, they'd be nice, but you saw the beginning part of the budget are things that they're non-negotiables. They're open your doors expenses. So the missing puzzle pieces right now, legislative and executive lobbying has been successful in increasing overall foundation aid. Again, actually, as of next Tuesday, so Ms. McDonald couldn't be more perfect timing. I believe we're coming to your office next Tuesday. Myself and some of the local superintendents, and Ms. McDonald's always so approachable, even coming to our meeting. But again, lobbying that schools do need funding in general at large. Tuition revenue, gain greater than loss. Now, we talk about tuitioning students out. But I think it's very important to remember that a large portion of our budget is based upon tuition gain from the North Greenbush Common School District students that do attend, both in what we service for transportation, but also our students that attend here as students. So again, our 8th grade class, summer class students from Little Red. Also, our 2nd grade class, Little Red open house was canceled last night due to the weather, but right now we have a projected 10 students that will attend here for Little Red for 2nd grade. So that's a good thing, because that revenue allows us to balance out that gap. So again, there's been debate about class size, but again, that is guaranteed revenue. That 10 students is better than 5, and that does help us overall, so just to point out there. So again, if all 10 of those families committed to GD, that's a good thing for us. But they haven't committed yet. And of course, I put this one in bold, and it's not to market our office, but it's just I think we lose track of those pieces, is the continued success of administrative restructuring. As you know, in the past 4 years, we had a business consultant, data management. It has eased the burden in increasing costs, because once again, doing more with less. It is only saying that because, as you know, each time you hire a person, there's a cost of the salary, benefits, ERS, TRS, FICA. But again, to point out that we've had individuals in those roles that we have not replaced in those years. That's allowed us to be in an area that is smaller. That gap would obviously be much larger because we'd be having a more increase if we had those positions still there. Just to point out there. Again, people forget when we do cut positions, but again, those positions were not directly managing the student experience. They did not affect the student experience directly, and we felt they could be done with current staff. And again, they could be added, but obviously at the expense of the student piece. We felt that it's better to put that in the hands of students through an elective or through a course or again, a program than obviously, administrative assistance. So next steps. Obviously use the data we have to make sure that those fixed costs are actual, numbers, make sure those hard numbers come in. We are waiting on those numbers as well. We always re-examine each line item. Again, I think we're in a good spot right now. I think we know exactly what we need. But of course, that's one thing Belle and I do very often, is look at each line item and see, are we too high, are we too low? We do that a lot, particularly with fuel. Again, this is a very cold winter so far, so we'll be looking at the end of, how much fuel did we use, both as a school and also in gasoline and diesel. Did we overdo it with budgeting, or were we right on the mark? And if we were right on the mark, do we increase that, or can we decrease that if we were overkilling that one? So again, are we right in the space we should be? And of course, use our enrollment data to ensure, obviously the open door needs are met. And again, so that short versus long term is a point I just want to keep pointing out there. Are we able to meet the short term? But is a program that we're putting out there, can we make sure that next year we can run it and not have to cut it simply just to make our bank, so to speak? So of course, the last one is always kind of cliche, but very true. Be patient, ask questions, and of course, we always look for ways to think outside the box. That's why I point out that piece that I bolded before. It was very important that we thought outside the box rather than rolling those positions over. We thought outside the box. Mrs. Carbone's position actually was a product of that data management piece, of looking at something different when somebody left us rather than rolling that position over and over. Again, that allowed us to actually save programming that perhaps we might take for granted today. Questions?
I don't know if it's really a question or if it's just a concern, I guess. So Bridget's class, and Bridget's now a sophomore, they were one of the last groups probably of the 16 and 17 class size, I'm guessing. Cooper's class, who is in 4th grade, has 56 kids. So how are we planning to pay for high school for these really large class
I am
sizes
so
that are
glad
coming,
you-
because that's making me very nervous.
I am so glad you said that. It's almost, and I swear we didn't.
I mean, that's
card.
like-
that is something. Belle,
That's
please.
a
I know
lot.
I'm putting you on the spot, but did we not just talk about this 2 days ago? I mean, Belle's going to say yes no matter what. I know it's kind of off the spot, but we're out.
And it's only 4 years away.
But that's a piece too. So many have said, I don't know who many, but you could say, well, to close that gap, just cut your high school tuition down, all right, and you're fine. You could do that, but then, like you said, when that class gets up there, I'd be coming back to you saying, folks, we need to add $300,000 back into the tuition line, and we have to find that somewhere. Remember, like a savings account, once you allocate that money to something else, it means you're cutting something else to make that bank. So, for example, we do not always spend our entire tuition line item. Absolutely not. That's why we're able to buy buses and things like that. But again, that's preparing us because when that bigger class, and actually that's not the only one, the current 7th grade class I think is 48.
48.
48.
Like I said,
I mean-
Bridget had 33.
And the current 8th grade is 32.
32.
So so at some point, so if you think about it, 32 kids are leaving GD this year, and we have to pay their tuition. Next year, minimally, we have to increase that by 11 students, if not more. And if they all chose Brittenkill, that's another $100,000. So like I said, so that's why we kind of keep some line items a little bit flush, because it's either budget now Or we can just spend it this year and be fine, but then next year we'll be saying, guys, we got to cut that extra FTE because we have to make that budget. Because like I said, we cannot not tuition.
So you're telling me I can sleep tonight because you
Oh.
already have it all under control, right?
Please.
Okay.
You can please.
I want to make sure
High school
Cooper
is
can go
ready.
to high
Yes.
school. No, I'm just kidding.
But it is, it's very, and I will say,
We'll
that's
have
what
to
makes,
live with Nana.
I am so glad you said that, because that's what makes the budget process very tempting, because it's very tempting because it's low-hanging fruit. It's very, because as you see, it's a $1.6 million line item. It'd be very tempting to say, you know, if we knock it down to 1.45, we're done. Awesome. Or, you know, let's knock it down to 1.3, and then maybe we can, you know, hire a couple extra staff, and that'd be fantastic. But yes, that staff could be long gone by the time we get to that point of that high school group. So exactly. So that, I'm so glad you said there is a long-term plan. That's why we're always projecting. And again, not to keep saying this, but I pat Bell on the back for this entirely. That's why we even look at financial payments through 2036. And as gross as that might sound, it's so important for us to know what are we going to pay in principal and interest up to 2036, even on our buildings, because we need to make sure that even if we're gone, someone else can sustain that.
Okay,
That's what
thank
they
you.
say. Great
Thank
question.
you for being
You're not going
forward
anywhere,
thinking.
by the way, but anyway.
Thank you.
Forward thinking, yeah.
I'm on. Thank you.
A little concerned there. Good.
It's on tape now. Questions? Great question. Paul.
The development that they want to put around town. I know it would affect the school, but I never thought about the high school aspect. So if they have older kids, that could put another burden on us as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, any development that does go into town, and that could be, or any home that is sold, you know, so any family that turns over, yeah, and if they might have children that never set foot in our school, but if they have a high school student, grade 9 above, yeah, we are responsible. Folks, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll be back in March, of course, with the next update, maybe some more concrete pieces, but we always get there, just it's a patient journey.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Reardon. I think we will, I see Assemblyman McDonald here, so I think I will turn the floor over to Mr. McDonald.
Very good, thank you, and to the board and to Dr. Reardon, thank you for the opportunity. Just to stop by, and not just say hello, but maybe kind of give you a little bit of update from what's going on in Albany. Tom will get another update again next week when he's in, although communicate quite regularly anyways. You're very fortunate to have a pretty hands-on superintendent, that's for darn sure. The budget was released back, it's almost a month and a half, 2 months ago now. And the governor actually put in a little bit more money to start off with than we expected. You know, on the average, it's somewhere between 2 to 3% increase. And then, of course, since that time, he and the controller had a little press event that talked about the state's having some financial problems. The $2.3 billion he talked about actually turned out to be about a $900 million revenue gap. Today, our economic advisors, the Assembly and the Senate each have their own economic advisors, well-known people that are very much engaged with the whole federal, national, international market. We were making a pitch that it's not as bad as you think. There's been a lot of, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but our tax receipts were coming in much lower in January and February on a daily basis because unlike probably most of the people in this room, there are some people who actually have to prepay their income taxes. That means ultra millionaires and billionaires, and they haven't been paying because with the federal tax change, there's a different behavior. There's no rush for them to have to do it right now. So the governor was reacting to it, and rightfully so, I would say, the controller, saying, oh my God, we're down $100 million a day, run this out, it's going to be this amount of money. As February come to a close, and as we're starting to see, they're still going to be paying their taxes, just that it's going to be, they're not forced to pay them up front. So we're projecting we can probably add up to $900 million more into what the proposed budget was. The governor's at zero, the controller doesn't want us to do anything, he wants us to cut. Tomorrow is March 1st statutorily, we have to make a decision. What is going to be our revenue number to work with? And my guess is somewhere between $0 and $900 million additional, so it makes it a $173 million budget. Obviously, the more the better. The question is who benefits from it. And at the same token, we have to be very mindful of the fact that most of the real known people that know the economy are predicting maybe end of this year, beginning of next year, Next year is an election year at a national level. Those are always volatile years for the market for a lot of different reasons, that we expect to see some pullback, and that could have unintended consequences. So I prefer us to be a little more conservative, so I don't hold we're at the 900 million, but we'll have a number nonetheless, and that will start the process. The important thing to keep in mind is that March 15th is when the Assembly and the Senate both passed what's called a one-house budget resolution. It's basically taking out what our priorities are. I can guarantee you the Assembly will be putting in a higher number than what the government proposed for education funding. Then you plug that into the program, and everybody kind of gets a number of what it's going to be. I also think, unlike in the past, I think the Senate now has changed dramatically. There's a whole story with that, but we're not going to get into that today because it's caused a lot of interesting things. But many of the individuals that are now in the Senate come from New York City, and they're part of that whole campaign for fiscal equity and more education funding, which is good. The question is, when you plug it into the formula, what does it do to maybe the district in Harlem, but also the district here in North Greenwich? So there's going to be more energy being put into those areas. And the challenge is those areas that the former leadership got most of the money, what do? You take it away from them? Or do you try to slide the formula to try to help districts that have been underfunded for years? So it's extremely complicated. I have 13 school districts, so this is number 9 that I've talked to, and every district's different. I mean, honestly, North Greenbush and Waterford are my wealthier districts. The ones who probably get the lesser bite at the apple for aid, they get aid, but it's not anywhere near what a district like an Albany or a Troy gets. You mentioned a charter school, but it's funny because, Albany School District has 10,000 students. They have 2,000 students in charter school, so they are paying out $40 or $50 million a year in charter tuition for kids to go to Troy and someplace else. It's just a very, very interesting district in that aspect. So let me get back to our one-house budget resolution. I'm sure there'll be more money in there, and then we have to negotiate with the governor on what it's going to be. And come sometime by the stroke of midnight on March 31st, Tom will get an email from me saying, here's the education runs. You'll have a certain number. And with that certain number, you can help finish off the budget. So money is always the big thing that people get excited about. If you look at the numbers at the time you like some print, you got to be careful. The operational increase right now is not significant. It's not an awful lot. You'll see a lot more in regards to capital, but capital is a reimbursement for what you've already spent. So don't go spending it is my point. And you really want to be carefully conservative going forward because something's going to change. I think we did get a spot of good news a couple weeks ago. I think with the teacher retirement system, contribution is going to be edging down a little bit for the first time, but that's not forever. And so therefore, it's one of those things where, you might have a cushion to work on in case something happens, but be careful, don't spend it, because things are going to happen. You and I are going to follow up about that prescription drug insurance, because that 12%, that's crazy, but that's a false topic.
I was hoping you caught that.
Prescription drug utilization, and prescription drug costs, believe it or not, are actually going down. However, depending on plan design, you're kind of getting caught. We're going to follow up on that in the next couple of days.
We file on Tuesday. So
What?
I think we have an appointment on Tuesday, so it'll be good.
We're going to talk about that. The other interesting aspect, and this is one of those political dynamics, right? Difficult. Governor's proposing to make permanent tax cap, but actually the Senate, the new Senate, has actually voted to make it permanent. Now, we didn't do that in the Assembly because we're very concerned. It's not that we don't want to extend a tax cap. We do. We have no problem with that. We all know that taxes are challenging for everybody. But at the same token, whether it's a municipal government that has to pave the roads, whether it's a school district that has to get books in the library, at some point, if you make that cap permanent without some modification to recognize real-life events, we're really putting the districts in a very bad situation, which at the end of the day, it's the students that are going to suffer. So the Assembly is not against extending the tax cap, but we want modifications, both for local governments and for school districts, to recognize real expenses. When that tax cap, and I remember I was Mayor Cahoes when the governor proposed it, They said it's going to be just like the state of Massachusetts. It's going to be a 2% cap. Have we gotten 2% yet? It's been 0.4%, it's been 0.8%. I work in 3 different BOCES, Questar here in Rensselaer County, Capital Region BOCES in Albany County, and then Wishy, which is Warren, Washington, and Washington County. Up in those neck of the woods, rural districts, which go a little further east, and you do the same thing here, they've had a negative tax cap for the last 3 or 4 years because the formula is so convoluted. And even districts that are actually having some growth, depending on how that growth comes onto their tax rolls, it's actually penalizing districts, which it's not supposed to do. So we want to make some modifications. I don't want you to think that the state assembly is about raising taxes. We're not. We're just trying to find out a way to not strangle districts. And that's always challenging because we're very fortunate. There's a lot of familiar names on this board that have been coming here for 7 years. That doesn't always work out in many school districts. There's a lot of turnover. Sometimes people just focus on today. We have to worry about what today and tomorrow is going to bring. So the tax cap discussion will be a large discussion, more along the BOCES line, which indirectly impacts you. The governor's proposed to consolidate all the expense-based aids, which can be problematic for districts. You probably don't deal with BOCES as much as others because BOCES is more heavily weighted towards the 9 to 12 or the high school area, but certain special services, a child moves in, you have challenges, it makes a big difference. So that's our process. March 31st, we're supposed to be done. I never always liked the idea of the budget being done on April Fool's Days because if you had it done on April Fool's Day, they'd think it was a joke, right? But we've been pretty certain. We've been pretty good the last 7, 8 years. We've pretty much been April 1st, come heck or high water. 1 year, I think we were a week late in that sense. So we shall see what happens. I'm just trying to think of anything else that's pertinent to your discussion. I don't know if there's any questions that the board may have, or Tom, or the public.
Just want to once again compliment Simon McDonald. I mean, he's the most approachable, and I've never sent you an email that you didn't write back to it at least within like 2 hours. So I'm not sure how you do it.
Response, man, I like it, but you'll get one.
No, you're quick. I mean, really, I've never met a more responsive person. So.
It's awfully kind, but thanks to you guys. This is not an easy job, and you're not doing it for your kids. You're doing it for the community. And it's interesting you mentioned about the development that's being proposed. I've been kind of watching it from a distance. It is amazing how residential growth is usually good because it leads to a broader community, but it also, commercial, you usually don't have to educate the kids in the commercial. There's no kids there. Residential, depending on how it's designed and how it's marketed, it can bring more children, but on the other hand, that's not always a bad thing. Kids are great, but you have to be mindful of the unique situation here. Most of all the districts I have, the good news is you're not the smallest. I have Green Island, which is really small, but you've got a very unique situation here, and you got a great environment. So, thank you for all the work that you do. Anything else? Any other questions?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for what you're doing for us.
Mr. McDonald for coming
What's
up.
that?
Thank you for what you do for us.
Oh,
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Getting back to our agenda, 2.3, fiscal report.
Okay. So, talking more about assessment, first, thank you, Stephanie Carbone, for compiling it and running all of those kids in 7 days, which is amazing. Thank you to the teachers who have spent so much time meeting days at a time and sifting through all that data so that we can make the best use of it and push our kids who need to be pushed. So that has been very time consuming, and I appreciate all the hard work. Speaking of testing, Tuesday we ran a practice test. Our New York State test in ELA 3 through 8 will be on the computer this year. We've joined many of the districts who have already taken a jump in and tried out some different grade levels. So our ELA testing is going to be all 3-8 online, and math, 5th grade is piloting the math testing online. The rest of the grade levels will do paper testing. But Tuesday, all the districts who are doing this tried to log on at the same time, across the state because last year there were some glitches. So it was a good chance for us to test our infrastructure, which was great. So we had over 200 students log on at the same time and run that hour of testing, and it was smooth, very smooth. I think out of 200 and a little over 210 computers, one of them had trouble starting, and we just had to get a different computer. So with all of the new technology we've used and updating the infrastructure, it worked beautifully. So it was a success across the state. So they've worked out any glitches they had, so we're ready for the testing. So that was exciting. Let's see, Dr. Reardon talked about Career Day, so thank you to Dr. Reardon and Mrs. Ward for organizing a wonderful event. Thank you to Janine Mitchell. There was a wonderful snowflake dance a week or so ago, and they had a wonderful time. We had a whole school assembly to continue our kindness initiatives and to kick off Pick a Reading Partner, which is going to be a challenge for students to read all through the month of March. There's lots of activities that we're doing with the students to incentivize them to keep reading all month long. There's a literacy night scheduled for March 20th at 5 p.m., so that's exciting. Incoming kindergarten parent information night is the 7th at 6 o'clock, so if you know anyone, the kindergartners who are registering, I know when I was talking to someone yesterday, said, oh, I know of 2 kids who are coming to GD, but they have not registered. So we're trying to get the word out, so anyone you know, any little peeps, our parent information night is, again, next Thursday at 6, and then screening would be the 13th. We talked about the graduation drill, and that's it for me.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? No. Great, thank you. 2.4, PTA and SEPTA. Here we have the PTA Vice President. Did you want to talk?
Do you want your sheet?
I have it. Everyone, I'm Paul Knefka, Vice President of Lawrenceville PTA. A couple of things we got going on. We have Lego Club just started. We're up to 116 students this year, our largest yet. We did improve our display cabinet, so when you guys go out, please take a look. Each week, the kids build bigger and bigger, and we've been having trouble fitting everything in. So a little bit of help with Lego Club and some donations. We did a little children improvement. We have GD Got Talent coming up. Mrs. Mack is a good sponsor of that. That is going to be March 15th, 6:30 here. Rehearsals will be the 5th of March.
Kate Rodriguez says she feels like we have 800 acts, but we don't have a count, so it should be interesting.
Always a fun one. Mary mentioned the Harper's coming up. We have a literary night. We also have a local mother from Gardner Dickinson who is an author. She's going to be in to speak. We have our book fair coming up. And we also hosted What is Vaping night at our last PTA meeting through the Rensselaer County Board of Health. They were here to talk to the students about it not that long ago. And it's everywhere, so I actually learned a couple of things I never knew about. So important to keep an eye on the kids. So, and we got bike rodeo and the teachers night coming up in June. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Thanks.
For SEPTA, we had a meeting on February 5th, and it was a speaker on the Medicaid and OPWDD, which is the disability process. We had, with the speakers and everybody, we probably had about 20 people around the table, which was really nice. And there's been a lot of changes in getting children declared disabled and onto Medicaid. for the waiver services. So it was pretty enlightening, and I think everybody really got, some things out of it. That's it.
If I came to that night, there was a lot of information. There's a lot of process that has to go through that. If you don't know what you're doing each step of the way, you can get very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's been over a year and a half. I still don't have a service.
Yeah, it's kind of like from some of the parents, if you're not working with the right people, it still becomes very cumbersome to work your way through that process. So, there's a lot of good information.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Any questions for? No? Okay. 3.0, appointments and authorizations. We'll do 3.1 through 3.11 as a consent agenda, unless anybody wants to pull anything out. No? Okay. 3.1, approve CSE, CPSC recommendations as per attached. 3.2, accept the resignation of Vincent Benassi, custodial worker, effective March 8, 2019. 3.3, appoint Stephanie Ryan for long-term substitute teacher aide position, effective February 1st, 2019 through June 27th, 2019, as per the WTAA contract. 3.4, appoint Laura Petruska as substitute teacher aide, non-certified teacher at $80 per day, and a recess cafe aide at $11.10 per hour. 3.5, appoint Quinn Olivia Pytel as substitute teacher aide, non-certified teacher at $80 per day. 3.6, appoint Michael Rankin as substitute teacher aide, non-certified teacher at $80 per day. Accept the donation of a swivel C3 with a value of $799 from Dr. Peter DeWitt. 3.8, approve the 6th grade field trip to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City on March 22nd, 2019. Approve the 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. on April 16, 2019 through April 18, 2019. 3.10, approve the 7th grade trip to Old Sturbridge Village on May 9th, 2019. And finally, 3.11, approve the 5th grade field trip to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island in New York City on June 10th, 2019. Somebody to make a motion. You want to talk about some of these items?
Sure, just kind of give you a summative piece of kind of some of the pieces you just heard. Obviously, 3.2 is the last. That was as of today. Vincent Benassi, who's been with us for almost a year, great guy, but is deciding to pursue another career endeavor. So he will be leaving us. So we'll be opening that position is posted already. So if you know anyone that's interested, please refer them to Facebook or social media or our webpage. Besides our consent pieces that you'll see, Stephanie Ryan, our long-term position, that's for Chris Phillips, the position vacated by Chris Phillips earlier this year, or I should say in the winter. You'll notice the 3.7, the swivel C3, just that is a camera system. Dr. Peter DeWitt is actually a former principal. He's a consultant and author that now lives locally. He's actually a mutual contact with Peter Mesh and myself. We all have gone to school together at some different point. And basically what the swivel C3 swivel is, it's almost like a motion-censored camera that if you wear the device, it follows you as the teacher or as a student. So, for example, if you were filming your class in the old days where you'd set up the tripod and you kind of hope it would catch you, it follows movement and basically records. And also, if it hears noise, it moves over. The eye will move over and kind of capture that. So, originally, it's a tool developed to kind of for teachers to watch themselves and then maybe kind of critique their lesson. But it has, many, many uses. So, again, Dr. DeWitt was. Again, I'm not going to question why he wants to donate it, but it works and it's great. We've been practicing with it. Peter's been using it. Peter Mesh, that is, and we will certainly accept the free donation. So it's a great tool for us to use. We will find a way to use it. And also, it's the out-of-town field trips. Again, all these are capture everything from the DC trip for the 8th graders to the 5th grade trip to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. That's been their tradition. Notice Old Sturbridge Village is a new piece for 7th grade, as well as the American History Museum for 6th grade. So those are two different out-of-town trips than obviously the DC and the traditional Ellis Island trip for 5th grade.
So one thing I want to talk about with the field trips, this may be a real touchy subject because I know we've grown to love this trip, but as a parent, I'm getting very nervous about Washington, D.C. The climate down there is getting very tense and very hostile. I guess this year would be a good year to see how things are, but with next year being an election year, going into the election year, I'm a bit nervous. my son went on this trip a couple years ago, and he enjoyed it a lot. My daughter would be in 8th grade next year. But I think we really need to think about that when we look at it, just for the safety of the kids. I'm not going to not approve this one because we've got an old plan and they're doing fundraising and all that, but maybe we should look at something else next year. I'm not saying I wouldn't approve it next year, but maybe it should be on our radar to something to think about.
Just to throw in there, if this kind of helps the board too, is one of the pieces that we added this year, and I think that what you just said parlays very well into this, is this current 8th grade class, as you know, so Mr. Strang has, child like us, basically we did meet as a parent group, because really these traditions are relatively new traditions, and so as much as they are traditions, they're not 20, 30 year kind of pieces. They're 5, 6, 7 year pieces. So the out of town trip or the overnight, I should say, for 8th grade. One of the pieces we did explore this year with the current cohort, and kind of poll the parents and the students about some other opportunities. In this case, we've narrowed out of Boston and Washington. In this group, Washington was chosen. But certainly, I'd like to keep that tradition of using the because again, the majority of the fundraising for this trip, I'm sorry, not the majority, the lion's share is done by the families in that cohort. So I think you're right. They certainly should have a say in kind of where the children go, as the children should too. So I think I hope you bring that sentiment too, because I'd like to see that same thing happen with the current 7th grade going to 8th grade. It's that same parent meeting, giving students all options, not just, here's things you'd see in DC, here's things you might see in Boston, here's things you might see in Philly, here's things you might see in New York City, what are you thinking? I think it's always great to look at other opportunities.
Just as a participant of the process, I thought it went really well. There's a lot of ideas that were put out there from different parents on different locations to go to see, but I thought it was good. We whittled it down and everybody was in agreement at the end, so I'd say it was good. Keep that going.
We keep the democratic process going, so.
Okay. I just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, that's it.
Any other questions or discussion on any of these items?
Mrs. Castle?
Yes.
Mr. Hirakawa?
Yes.
Mr. Lanisi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Strang?
Yes.
Okay, 4.0, informational. Our next regular meeting will be March 21st, 2019 at 7 p.m. right here in the library. 4.2, opportunity for the public to be heard. I see you have the book closed, so I'm going to guess nobody.
I memorized the long list.
Long list of nobody. I guess I'll open it up. Any last takers? No? Okay. 5.0, request for executive session. I don't believe we have a need.
I'm good.
Okay. So we don't need to return to open, and we will adjourn. I need to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Great. All those in favor? Aye. All those against? Okay.